It's 2025, and I feel like people still don't know how loud their music should be when they send it out for distribution. We keep hearing different guidance, things keep changing. You hear minus 14 LUFS, this minus 8. So, what is the right level to master your music at? In this video, I'm going to give you my take on that. It's worked for me my entire career. Now, as a thank you for you spending your time with me today, in the description, I have a guide that talks about everything you need to know about compressors, how to set them up, what the different styles are, and it's something you're going to need to fully understand if you really want to master your music and make it competitive with all the other songs that are out there. That's my free gift to you, so check that out if that sounds interesting. I have a song by a band called Once Around. This song is called Love in War. It is loud. Can you see this right here? I think that's a little bit of foreshadow for what I'm about to talk about. It is at minus 5 LUFS. That goes against a lot of the guidance that you hear from the streaming services and also the distribution services like CD Baby or TuneCore or Distrokid, all those. So why do I choose to submit my music so loud? The answer is the only thing that you're actually in control of before you send it off for distribution is the quality of the song. So if the song sounds the best at minus 5 LUFS, then that is the level you should send it off to the distributor. Now, I know some of you are like, whoa, 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 Bobby, what are you saying? That's a bunch of nonsense. Now, in a second, we'll talk about the ceiling level that you should set your music to, depending on your goals for when you distribute the music. But I want to make a point here that music that is dense by nature, rock, metal, EDM, it is absolutely okay to prioritize the sound that you're going for in lieu of making it quiet just to satisfy some requirement that was made up by some people or a company. These targets will change and evolve over time. And if you've sacrificed the sonic quality of your song is screwed. Your song is stuck living in the past. So if you listen to the song that I mixed and mastered, ask yourself, does it sound good at this level? The answer is yes. The kick drum has punch. The bass is super full. It sounds massive. The snare cracks through the mix. Nothing sounds mushy. These are all things that people say are going to happen to your song if you make it loud. That's not true. This song has a very high loudness potential. That means it was arranged in a way where we can really drive all these elements into each other and they just enhance each other as the loudness gets bigger. So really, what you need to do is focus on just trying to make the song sound as good as possible. If you're trying to make it as loud as your favorite songs and it's starting to sound like crap, then that's too loud. Turn it down. Now, something important that we have to talk about is the final output level that we are going to export the songs at. So if the goal is to put this out onto a CD, your output level should be about minus 0.2 dB. Now, personally for me, I don't worry about setting this as true peak. I use dB full scale. And the reason is I don't hear intersample peak clipping on CD players that I've played this stuff back on. Now, if you sell a CD player in your car, all you have to do to know if you can hear it is to render your song at these settings at 16-bit for CD. If you don't hear any crunchy, gross, weird stuff happening on like the kick drum or snare drum hits, then you're probably fine. The reason we don't want to put this at 0 dB is because there is some variance in how good the decoders are for your car, stereo, or other CD players or whatever. And those can potentially overdrive the converter and then cause some clipping distortion. Universally, it seems like 0.2 dB is the sweet spot where you're going to get your best bang for your buck. Now, if we're talking digital distribution, like CD Baby or TuneCore or something like that, you have to check the guidance that your distributor wants the files in. Some of them are okay dithering to 16-bit. Some of them want it in 24-bit. You have to find out what they want. But usually under most circumstances, 16-bit is fine. Now, what the distributor is going to do is take that file and then convert it to other types of streaming formats, and then send it out to all the different services that stream music. Now, when they convert your file to these lossy formats like MP3 or M4A and all that Apple iTunes codec crap, there's going to be errors introduced into your music, and those errors can sometimes have some distortion. So what I recommend is convert your song to one of these low-quality, lossy MP3s or M4A file formats, and then listen to it played back. If you notice there's audible distortion, things just don't sound right, then we may need to adjust our output ceiling to be more accommodating, to build in more headroom so that when those errors happen, they don't manifest as clipping artifacts. Now, in my experience, this doesn't happen very often unless you have super, super loud music. So let's do a little experiment, huh? I'm a scientist, probably should be doing experiments. I've made several different bounces of this song at different output levels, and I also used a true peak limiter on these four. On top of that, because this might be a question, is I'm also looking at 16 and 24-bit dithering. So we're going to see if we can actually hear all the different artifacts if you render these down at these aggressive loudness levels. This plugin right here is by Sonics. It's Pro Codec. It allows us to preview the sound of the encoder coming from our DAW. It's awesome. It allows you to hear what kind of artifacts you can expect if you were to export this song at two different MP3s. So we have 320 and also 128. That's to simulate like high quality streaming versus low quality streaming or free streaming from like Spotify. Some quick things I want to point out. This will tell us what the transcoded maximum peak value is after it gets processed at these different codecs. So let me just leave it at 0.2 dB full scale, and we'll see what the outcome is in terms of the peak volume after it gets transcoded. Because this is what everybody talks about is the end of the world, and it's ruining music, and it sounds terrible. So let me just show you. That does sound terrible, and it ruins music, but that's because I had all these going at the same time. Oh boy. Okay, let's try that again. We let it play all the way through. Here are the values for these different codecs. So it's telling us that if we were to take this WAV file and convert it to 320 bit rate MP3, our max peak value is going to be 0.47 dB. So the idea is that your converters, if they can't accommodate this extra headroom, are actually going to clip and create lots of audible distortion. But I would argue you probably can't even hear that distortion over the compression that's happening from the MP3 itself. If we were to convert it to a even lossier format, say a more compressed format, so 128 bit rate, now the peak is way louder. When you decode this audio, it's at 1.77 dB above zero. Okay, these are what people refer to as intersample peaks. Now, I don't think I can absolutely rule out something like Gibbs phenomenon causing these values to be louder, but I think that's beyond this discussion. And let's just focus on MP3 for the time being. Now, if we reset these to 0 and we look at the same song exported with a full dB of extra headroom, let's see what the max decoded peak value is. We did not exceed 0 dB on the decoded high-quality MP3, but we're still getting an intersample peak of about 1.5 dB over 0 for the lossy 128 bit rate MP3. So what this is telling us is that, number one, the -1 dB full-scale requirement isn't even enough to prevent intersample peaks at these lossy formats. So if you go even lossier, like 96 bit rate, you're going to create an even larger intersample peak. That begs the question, do you really want to turn the volume down in your song to accommodate people that are listening to your music at lower quality levels? Let's listen to what the effect is of having the song played back when it's exported at -0.2 and at -1, because I have a feeling that the one that's louder is actually going to sound better and that you won't notice any noticeable distortion between those two different versions. I'm going to switch back and forth between these two, and you tell me which one you think sounds better. Now, I'll agree, at 128 kilobits per second, it doesn't sound that great, but that's what you're going to get regardless from these streaming services. Now, what about true peak? Let's do the exact same thing. Let's go 0.2 dB full scale at 4424 and then 0.2 dB true peak at 4424. And let's also see if it really does make it sound better. Sounds pretty similar to me. It's really hard to differentiate these. Now, I just analyzed the levels that we're getting. For the true peak limiter, we stay below digital 0, except I guess at the lowest streaming quality, it came out at exactly 0, according to this software. So it did a good job catching all the intersample peaks. So on the regular limiter, the peaks went over by 0.51 dB for the highest quality and 1.74 dB for the really lossy format. People say that this sounds really bad, but as you just heard, when I switched back and forth between these two, it sounded very similar the entire time. Now, there is a chance that if you play this back on a really crappy system, that your converter cannot accommodate that 1.74 dB of headroom. And so in that case, it's probably going to distort. But guess what? That's a very crappy playback system anyways. Your music's not going to sound good on it either way. So why take away from everybody else in the world that wants to stream your music because Joe Schmo has some bogus aftermarket Discman? I just don't get it. I might be ignorant. And by the way, as technology gets better, we're going to be just using the lossless files anyways. One last thing I want to leave you with. If we take something that is, let's say, really aggressive in terms of the ceiling level, the minus 0.2 dB, and we click this button over here, this will tell us what the difference in sound is when it gets encoded. So what are the artifacts that are being added or removed between a master that's at 0.02 dB full scale and one that's at like minus 1 dB full scale? Because that will tell us if we're getting additional artifacts baked in when we do these lossy conversions. Let's see what we hear. So what you're hearing right now kind of sounds like snow. That's what's happening to the high end of a WAV file when you convert it to this lower format. So it's kind of clouding the mix and adding like white noise essentially to the sound. Let's switch over to the one that was exported at minus 1 dB and see if the artifacts are any different. It sounds exactly the same to me. So what really is the benefit? There is no benefit, in my opinion. Sacrificing that 0.8 dB is just not worth it. Now, my opinion can change if someone can show me the path forward here for why we should bake in all this extra headroom. But logistically speaking, with all the streaming platforms, I just don't see how everybody's going to agree on the same thing. So you're always going to want to make your song as competitive as possible. Now that we know that the bit depth, the output ceiling, and whether or not it's true peak limited doesn't significantly impact the quality of our file once it gets downgraded to these lossy streaming formats, there's really only one final experiment to do. And that is, on my mastering chain, let's remove the clipper and the limiter and have a more dynamic mix and then do the lossy file conversion and see if it sounds better. So here's this song without a clipper or limiter in my mastering chain. So as you can see, it's a lot more dynamic than the official master that I have. So let's start by putting it at 128 kilobits per second bitrate, and let's just jump between these two versions. of these have that like white noise, snow kind of thing that just comes from the conversion to this MP3 lossy format. Let's go to just hearing the differences and see if there is more or less artifacts from having a quieter master versus the really, really compressed one. We are getting noticeably louder artifacts from the loud master. Perhaps that is just because this is a louder signal and therefore the artifacts are louder. So easy way to check this is let's just increase this level so that by ear they are about the same level overall, and then we'll listen to the difference in the artifacts after conversion. Sounds pretty similar to me. Now let's listen to just the artifacts. This shows that the difference between the quiet and loud master and the amount of artifacts coming out from the transcoding process will be the same regardless if it's a loud master or not. So there's really no advantage to supplying a master that is just quieter if it sonically sounds the same, quiet versus loud. Now in the real world, what most likely will happen is the loud mix will get turned down to some target. So let's do the same experiment. This time, instead of boosting this quieter master up, let's lower the volume of the louder master. Again, the level of the artifacts went down as we lowered the volume of the really compressed master. In my opinion, it's not noticeably different. So next time you see somebody comparing these things and saying that there's way more distortion that's being added to the louder master, just be aware that this level of artifacts that are occurring, regardless of a loud master or a quieter master, are going to be about the same. So what this means is that your loud master, when it goes and gets transcoded by the distributor, will have some level of artifacts in it. The streaming services that determine their target volume and they lower it down to accommodate their desired thresholds is also going to lower down the level of the artifacts from the transcoding process. And from these experiments, I show that if you have a quieter master without a clipper and even a limiter on your track, you're going to get about the same level of artifacts that you would get if you had both your loud master and your dynamic master playing at the same target loudness. The sonic difference comes from you using your ear and making sure you don't just murder all your transients. If you can get your song loud and it still sounds good, that is the best form of your song. So if your digital distributor says, I want your files at 24-bit with 1 dB true peak headroom, that's really just a suggestion. Ultimately, you're giving up a full dB of loudness for your track to accommodate a standard that has just been decided by some company. Now, you can prepare your song so that it is at minus 0.2 dB full scale and still send it to them. But be aware that when they encode it for these lossy formats, there might be some additional distortion that comes from that. But if you did your due diligence and exported it from your DAW, you know about what the final product was going to sound like. And if you're okay with that, then leave it nice and loud. If you want to play it safe and make sure that under no circumstances it's not going to cause a problem, then maybe set your output ceiling on your limiter to -1, and then make sure that you're using true peak limiting so that there is very little chance for intersample peaks during the transcoding process. There are no rules. Ultimately, you need to use your ears to know what is right for your song in your music. So trying to accommodate one service by putting your output level at -12 could put you in a really bad position in these other streaming services that also receive music from your distributor. Try to optimize your song's loudness potential. Don't overdo it by trying to match another target, and certainly don't underdo it by trying to accommodate one streaming platform's guidance. Let them decide what they want to normalize your song to. That is out of your control, regardless of what level you send it to them anyways. So if you totally disagree with this, leave a comment. Let me know your perspective. Let's have a discussion. This is a topic that never seems to go away, so I just wanted to give my perspective on what's worked for my career and share it with all of you. I want to remind you that in the description, I have that free downloadable guide for you about compression. Definitely go and check that out. There's a lot of cool tips and tricks on how to dial in the perfect compression for your music so you can optimize the loudness of your song. If you want to go deeper into mastering and learn all the details on how to do it at a professional level to make sure that your music will always leave your studio fully optimized and sound great anywhere it's played, I have an entire course that painstakingly goes through every step of the process, and it gives you my complete 6-step listen framework so you can make sure that you are making the right mastering decisions every time. And because I love all you guys so much, there's a coupon code in the description for that, so check that out. I'm Bobby Bale, the mixing and mastering engineer at Raytown Productions, and I'll see you in the next video.